DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned in to the show where you earn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, we're not done. We're going to give you a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves all of us, including yourself. It's going to make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. Then we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one framework, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, a daily masterclass, a bunch of books that is called Work on Your Game. The books aren't called Work on Your Game. The class is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic, you get what you reward. I just talked about this a couple days ago in the episode where I told you how to stop taking other people's shit. One of the things that we talked about in that episode is setting your standards. And when your standards are set, you're letting everybody know what's going to be rewarded, what's going to be tolerated, and what's not going to be tolerated. And the things that you reward in life, you will get more of, even when you're dealing with just yourself, and especially when you're dealing with other people. So before I go further into that, let me tell everybody that I have a text message line where I want you to text me and just say hello when you text me there, because I want you to get my daily motivation text that I send out every single morning. Every day I send out daily motivation text. Just a quick message to keep you sharp, focused, on point, ready for the day that is in front of you. It'll come straight from my number. So text me at this number right here. My number is 305-384-6894. Once you text me there, we're going to confirm that you're you, and then you'll be getting my daily motivation every day. And you can ask questions there, you can share challenges there, you can engage with me there, because every day I take some time, 10 to 30 minutes every day, and I'm responding to text messages from people who are in my texting community. So once you text there, once you're confirmed, understand that that is me who is reading your text and responding to your text. That is not a bot, that is not my assistant or another person, that is me there texting. So if you want to connect with me directly, that is the best way to do so. That number is also down below in the description. So this topic, again, you get what you reward. Understand that everything that we pay attention to, everything we focus on, it grows and it increases, and everything that we ignore, it gets smaller and it goes away. Eventually, it no longer exists, at least in our lives. So keeping this idea in mind, today we're going to talk about what things you may be rewarding to your detriment, maybe, that are getting bigger in your life and you don't even want them, and also what things that you actually want more of in your life, but for whatever reason you haven't been paying enough attention to, you aren't giving enough of your resources to, and it's starting to go away and to your detriment. So let's talk about this so this can become a conscious thing for you, so that we make sure we're giving our resources in the right place and getting more of what we want and less of what we don't want. Very simple concept, but are we executing on it? That's the question. Point number one, the topic once again is you get what you reward. I want you to think about culture. And this word culture can mean so many different things to so many different people. When I say culture here, what I'm talking about is what is the temperature? What are the accepted practices? What's going on, and what are people expecting of you and of themselves in the many environments that you're a part of? So there's a culture in your neighborhood, there's a culture with your family, there's a culture with any team you're a part of. If you're on a sports team, that team has a culture. When you are in a business, if you have a job, there's a culture at the job that you work at. It might be a weak culture, it could be a very strong culture. It may be a culture that is conducive to success and forward progress. It can be a culture that is conducive to failure and things going backwards. But there is a culture in every environment. Again, it can be a very strong culture, it can be a weak culture, it can be moving you forward, it can be moving you backward, but there is a culture in every group. Even a household, the home that you live in, there's a culture. Even if you live in a home by yourself, there's a culture in your home, just you. If there's 8 people living in your house, there is a culture there. Have you ever, for example, so this first point, we're talking about culture here. Have you ever gone to someone's house and they have you take your shoes off when you walk in the house? Or they have you put some kind of covering or something on your shoes? Sometimes when I'm on my Instagram story and people see my shoes, they're like, Dre, what is that you have on your shoes? It looks like, it's like these blue coverings. They look like, you might think they're bags or surgical masks, but what they actually are shoe coverings. They are actually made as shoe coverings. These are things that I put on my shoes every time I walk in the house, so that whatever I stepped on when I'm outside of the house, I'm not tracking it into my home. You know, in the bathroom, in the bedroom, and all over the floors, everywhere that I go. I mean, who knows what you're stepping on when you're outside? So I put these covers on my shoes, and anyone who comes into the house, they put these covers on their shoes so that we're not tracking any stuff from the outside world into our home. That's part of the culture here. Anywhere that you go, there are certain aspects of the culture. Again, things that are tolerated, things that are not. As we talked about a few days ago in the episode on not taking other people's shit. I told you how when I was working at Foot Locker and a guy kept showing up late for work, and eventually one day he got fired. Keith was studying the culture that, okay, Keith being the boss there who did the firing, part of the culture here is you are not going to show up late for work. And there were other places that I worked. I remember I worked at a movie theater once, and the culture there was, it was not conducive to a successful business. They were doing a lot of business because it was a movie theater and it was in a great location, and a bunch of people would always come through there, and that movie theater was doing tens of thousands of dollars in revenue at least on the weekends, Thursday through Sunday. That movie theater was making a lot of money because it was like 50 of us working there, and many of us working the registers, and the lines just never stopped. And movies are coming out and people are just streaming in there over and over and over again. But the management they didn't set a culture. The head manager was kind of a pushover type of guy. The other managers were not very attentive. They were just not very, they weren't very on point. They weren't very focused. The employees could just get away with stuff. People were coming to work late. People would just not come to work at all. People were just doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. Nobody had people would be walking around without their uniforms tucked in. The culture there was just crazy. It was basically a no holds barred environment where people just did whatever they wanted to do in that environment. And eventually the management team and the company that ran the management of that movie theater eventually got thrown out of there. And the movie theater is still there, but it just got replaced by some people who can run things a little bit better. But sometimes, like I said, there's always a culture. Sometimes the culture is taking you backwards. Sometimes it's taking you forward in a strong way or in a loose way. But there's a culture everywhere. In my building, for example, at least the building I live in right now, there was a couple who, I haven't seen them in a long time, so I don't know if they still live here. Hopefully not. But once they had gotten into the elevator, I was in the elevator by myself, and this couple got in, they had a dog. There's a white girl, black guy, they had a dog. And this dog smelled so bad. It smelled like a wet dog. The dog smelled like it was wet, but it wasn't wet. It just smelled bad. It was kind of like a dog gets wet and you're probably gonna have to give it a bath because it gets that nasty smell and all its fur and all its hair and all that stuff. But apparently this couple hadn't washed the dog. The dog smelled really bad. The dog gets in the elevator and is smelling up the entire elevator. And I'm noticing the smell, of course, and I'm thinking to myself, and the people, this couple who had gotten in the elevator with the dog, they didn't seem to be fazed by this. They didn't seem to be bothered by it. They didn't seem embarrassed by the smell of the dog or anything. And I assumed, hey, maybe, who knows? Maybe they were having a bad day. Maybe they just needed to give it a bath after they took it out for a walk. Who knows? But I saw the same dog with the female in the couple. I saw her like 3 weeks later. And this time I seen them outside. And I walked past her, and I didn't walk that close to her, but I walked past her. And even in walking past her, I could smell the smell of that damn dog, and I was 10 feet away from the dog, and we're outside in open space. So imagine how strong a smell has to be for you to smell it when you're 10 feet away from a person, walking past them in outside open air space. That's how bad this dog smelled. And this was weeks later. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, at that point, after I saw them the second time, I'm like, okay, this dog just doesn't get cleaned, and apparently these people who own this dog, I guess they don't care about the smell of the dog. Maybe it is normal to them. This dog smelled really bad. And I'm like, there's no way they don't smell that. But then as I thought about it, I'm like, well, if the dog smells like that 3 weeks apart and it still smells like that, then their whole house has to smell like that, because the dog is a very strong smell. So I figured it's just part of the culture in their house, which is, I guess they're right, I suppose. But if and when they moved out, how did they even get that smell out of the house for the next people to move into where they were living? I mean, that smell is the kind of smell that will permeate the walls. But anyway, hopefully they figured it out, whoever that was. I told this story before, a couple days ago I mentioned it. One of my college coaches said, be on the floor and ready to practice 15 minutes before practice. That's part of the culture. Down here in Miami, speaking of basketball, the Miami Heat have a president who at one time was a coach by the name of Pat Riley. And one of the things that Pat Riley always said about the teams that he coaches, even when he was coaching these Showtime LA Lakers with Magic Johnson back in the day, and then he was coaching the New York Knicks and then coaching the Miami Heat, one of the things that he always says about his teams is the following. And I went and found this quote because I've heard him say it more than once, and he has passed this on to the current Miami Heat team. He's not the coach anymore, but he passes on to the team. And the saying is this, and I'm quoting him: "We are going to be the best conditioned, hardest working, most professional, unselfish, toughest, nastiest, the most disliked team in the NBA." Close quote. What is that? That's culture. Now, I'm not making an argument as to whether it is good or bad, but I'm letting you know, I'm just illustrating the point that he is setting the culture. And any of you who's a basketball fan, NBA fan, you know that when it comes to Miami Heat, they're always talking about Heat culture. That there are certain types of players that can play for us and certain types of players that can't play for us based on the culture of the team, based on the culture of the organization. They know who's going to fit, who's not going to fit. Ideally, every business, every team, every organization, even people, even you as an individual person, you need to know what your culture is so that when you are assessing other people and deciding, all right, can I work with this person? Can this person be a part of my life? Can this person be a part of my business? Can this person be involved in anything that I have going on? One of the things that you're testing them for, or assessing them for rather, is can this person fit into the culture of the world that I live in? Can they fit into my culture? In the episodes where I talked about my favorite podcasts, episodes 1637 and 1638, I mentioned the Momentum podcast by an entrepreneur by the name Alex Sharfin. And one of the things that he talks about in his programs, his coaching programs, is teaching business owners that you not only, when you're hiring somebody, you're not only hiring them for skill, of course, and not only for attitude also, but you're also hiring them for culture fit. Can this person fit into the culture of your organization, of what you have going on? And again, everyone be clear. Even if it's just you by yourself, there's a culture. All right, you have a culture. You are the boss. Even if it's just you on your own, you have to be the boss of yourself. And there's a culture that's going to be created, and someone's going to have to fit into that culture when you start dealing with another person. So the culture around you determines what you accept, what is accepted of you, and how you show up every single day. In the business world, when you raise the bar or you make the culture, let's say you just raise the standards of your culture, then some people who can't fit those standards are going to go away. And when you lower the bar, and let's say you weaken the culture, some people who loved the culture may leave because the culture is no longer there. The thing that drew them in is no longer present in that environment. And there was a building that I lived in once that the security had the security. I mean, the people who worked the front desk and would come if you had some type of issue, you called them, they would come to your apartment or whatever. The security had a very strong culture. It was part of their company culture, the security company's culture, the way that they did things, that they were super on point. They were the type of guys who, if you came to the swimming pool at the building with, let's say you were playing music off of a speaker, playing music out loud, that was not allowed at the building, within 3 minutes of you turning that music on, a couple security guards, would always be 2 or more security guards, would show up to the pool and tell you, hey, you can't do that. If you were at the pool with food or you had an open bottle at the pool, and those things were also not allowed, they would show up within 2 minutes of you bringing it and let you know that you had to get rid of it and it could not be there. And they would come shut it down. And it was always 2 or more of them. They were always very professional about it, but it was the culture. Even if, I remember one time I jumped the fence to the pool, I was just using it to warm up. I was about to go for a run outside and I jumped the fence to the pool because it wasn't open technically until I think 6 o'clock, and I was out there at 5 o'clock. And again, I was just warming up before I went for a run. I wasn't even getting in the water, but someone noticed me on the security cameras, and then the security guard came up there and said, no, you can't do that. You can't jump the fence and all this stuff. They even sent me a letter to my apartment and told me you can't do that anymore, even though I wasn't even using the pool. But in the long run, I could appreciate it because they had a culture of they are very on point and they notice everything and they're going to make sure anyone's violating, they're going to let you know immediately. But there are other buildings that I lived in. As a matter of fact, the building that I lived in right after that, when people would do these same things, nobody did anything. There was no culture being set. There was no culture being enforced. People would be at the pool at the hours that it wasn't even open. People would have food. People would have drinks. People playing music off a speaker, and nobody would do anything. Nobody would say anything because the culture just wasn't as strong. So understand that everywhere you go, everything you do, there is a culture. And if you're going to get involved with someone else or at a place, you need to figure out what the culture is there and ask yourself, is this something that's really conducive to the type of person you are and the place that you want to be? Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is you get what you reward. Number 2, remember the most scarce resource that you have, which is your time. All right, it's the most valuable and most scarce thing you have. So the question then is, where are you using your time? Where are you rewarding some aspect of life by giving it your most valuable resource, being your time? Because the way you use your time is going to be a reward to whatever or whomever you are giving your time to, since you can only give time to one thing at a time, and because when your time runs out, you can't renew it. It's different from money. I mean, you could give away a lot of money, but at the same time, you can make 10 times that same amount back in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 months. So it's not as valuable as time, because when you give away a certain amount of your time, you will never, ever get that specific time back. It is there. I mean, you've given it and it's gone. You're never getting that time back. So this is why time is more valuable than any other resource that you could possibly invest. And remember that what you pay attention to will grow, and what you ignore will shrink and go away. So when I was playing basketball, there were some coaches I had who we would spend almost all of our time in practice working on defense, because the coach was setting the culture that our focus here is going to be on defense and we're going to stop other teams from scoring points. Or there were teams I played on where all of our practice time was spent on execution of offense in the half court. We would just keep working on the same plays over and over again in the half court, while the second team unit or the second unit would be the defense, and we would just keep working on these over and over again. We never did full court. We didn't even spend that much time working on defense, to be honest. And there were other teams I was on where we would just focus on doing things like shooting all the time, a lot of shooting drills, or we would do a lot of full court scrimmaging. So there were different cultures based on who was in charge and how that organization was run. And I'm just giving you these as examples, not that any one is necessarily better than the other, but the point being that there's always a culture. Every organization has some type of culture, and whatever you are giving your time to, you are letting everyone in that organization know this is what matters most to us. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is you get what you reward. Number 3, ideally, you want to show the people around you how following your culture will lead to the results that they want. It will lead to some type of positive outcome, and or you want to show them how not following your culture is going to lead to bad outcomes. So you want a culture to be set. This is why I mentioned the phrase setting the culture. Setting the culture means letting everyone know this is the way that we're going to do things. And because we do things this way, we're going to get positive outcome X that everybody wants. That way it becomes everyone's idea to have the culture this way, to set the culture, and not just your idea to set the culture. Because if it's just your idea, then maybe some people will feel like they are acting against their will. And when people are acting against their will, they may not give their best effort. Actually, they probably will not give their best effort. So if you have enough leverage, though, on the other hand, because sometimes you may want to set a certain culture, but people are a little bit resistant. People don't know you. Maybe they don't want to because they haven't followed you long enough yet. Maybe they're not sure that setting the culture the way that you want is actually going to produce the outcome that you say that it's going to produce. So sometimes you're going to have to prove yourself. Now you're going to have to prove yourself so that people can see, oh, okay, following this culture does actually work. When I made my Virtual Mentors episode, when I talked about Puff Daddy, that was episode 195, I told you how a few days ago, how there was a time when he made all of his staff work all the way up to close to Christmas, and all of them were kind of pissed off because he made them work, but he was letting them know, listen, this is our culture here. Our culture here is that we outwork everybody. All right, if any of you wants to get to my level of success, you got to outwork people the same way that I'm outworking all y'all, and y'all work for me. And he was setting the culture. And because at the same time, he was creating so much success with his habits and routines and disciplines, everyone could see that he was actually telling the truth about the culture, and therefore everybody was willing to follow him. Another example from basketball, Shaquille O'Neal, in one of his books, he talked about how when playing for the LA Lakers, this was in 1999, a new coach had come in to lead the team, this guy by the name of Phil Jackson. Now, Phil had already been the coach of the Chicago Bulls throughout most of the 90s, had won 6 championships with a guy named Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen. And in an early preseason practice, the Lakers were kind of not responding to Phil, the new coach, the way that he wanted them to respond. Now, the Lakers hadn't won. This group of the Lakers had not won any championships yet, but Phil Jackson had won plenty of championships. Everybody knew who Phil was, but the culture for the LA Lakers was not set the way Phil had it in Chicago yet. And because, listen, Phil Jackson had a guy like Michael Jordan who helped set the culture. Even if Phil didn't do it, Michael Jordan would have did it. There was no Michael Jordan playing on the LA Lakers at that time. Shaq's pretty damn good, also his teammate Kobe, but neither of them was Michael Jordan at that point. And neither of them became Michael Jordan at the same time. But Phil Jackson wasn't liking the way that the players were responding to him in practice. And according to Shaq, Phil Jackson once yelled out in the middle of a practice early in that first season. He said, listen, if Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen can listen to me, then you motherfuckers shouldn't be saying shit to me. And what Phil Jackson was letting everybody know, and Shaq didn't spell this out, but I'm going to spell it out. He was letting them know, listen, all of you know who Michael and Scottie are. They have 6 championships. You guys have nothing. So if those guys with championships are listening to me, who is any of you to question me? And Phil Jackson himself had a bunch of championships at that point as well. So if I got championships and the guys that listen to me have championships and y'all have nothing, why is there an issue with me telling you something and you pushing back? That makes no sense. And apparently the Lakers listened because they went on to win the next 3 championships in the NBA once Phil Jackson came along, and he was able to set the culture the way that he wanted to. And sometimes, I'll add this as one last point, sometimes setting the culture doesn't mean you got to get everybody to go along. You just got to get the most influential people in the room to go along. When you get the most influential people in the room to go along, they will influence everyone else to follow the culture as necessary. So let's recap today's class, which is you get what you reward. And this episode really is about culture. Point number 1 is culture. Families, neighborhoods, sports teams, businesses. They all have cultures. A household has a culture. Even individual people have a culture. Pat Riley said, we're going to be the best conditioned, hardest working, most professional, unselfish, toughest, nastiest, most disliked team in the NBA. He was talking about the culture that he wanted to set for the Miami Heat. The culture around you and within you determines what you accept, what's accepted of you, how you show up, and what you're going to be attracted to is your internal culture and the culture of the places that you come around. Does this fit? Is this something that you can fit in? Point number 2, most scarce resource you have is time. Where are you using it? The use of your time is a reward to whoever or whatever you spend time on. The more time you give to something, the more it grows. The less time you give to something, the more it goes away. So in sports, I had coaches who would have us focus on defense, some would focus on offense, some would focus on drills and scrimmaging. They were all letting us know what is the most important thing to them. And point number 3, ideally, you can show people around you how following the culture will lead to results or how not following the culture will lead to bad outcomes. That way, they will buy into the culture because you need cultural buy-in to get everybody to go along, and it's much easier to acclimate new people when everyone who's already in has agreed to what the culture is. Like Shaq said, Phil Jackson told the Lakers when he first came around, if Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen can listen to me, there's no reason why any of you guys who don't have their success should not be listening to me. He was letting everybody know that he was setting the culture, and there had already been results from this culture. So how about you all stop pushing back against me and actually listen, because I know what I'm talking about. And I think we can say that that worked. So any of you who's looking to set your internal culture, first with your personal accountability, your discipline, your follow through, make sure you have a strategy and you're following through on that strategy, and then taking that culture and making it external in terms of building your business, building your career, then you may be a great person for me to work with one-on-one in my 3rd day mastermind. Is the only place that I offer direct one-on-one coaching. If you're interested, go to workonyourgameuniversity.com/call. Link is down below. Fill out a quick form. We will schedule a time to hop on Zoom and talk about where you're at, where you want to go, and how I can help you get there. Everyone who's listening, if you want to get my daily motivation text, which I send out every day to everyone who is in my texting community, just send me a quick text at the number 305-384-6894. Once you text me, then every day you'll be getting my daily motivation, which I send out every morning to keep you focused, sharp, on point, straight to your phone. Work on your game. Dre all